My name is Ronald Parker, and the day my own son-in-law called me a plumber on a yacht I had secretly bought in cash was the day I realized respect was far more valuable than money. He mocked me, sneered at me like I was some broke old man pretending to be rich, not knowing the yacht beneath his feet was mine and meant to be his gift. That insult, delivered with a smirk, changed everything. What started as my plan to heal my family turned into the moment I saw their true colors. Before I begin, I want to ask you, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like this one. They thought it was just a rental. That was the beauty of my plan. My daughter Lindsay and her husband Derek had never seen me as anything more than a retired man living modestly, a man who once built companies, but chose to live in the same small house, driving the same car, and wearing the same plain clothes. To them, wealth was measured by designer suits and flashy vacations. They had no idea I'd been planning something that would turn their assumptions upside down. 2 months earlier, I had walked into the yacht showroom wearing my best navy suit, the same one I wore when I buried my wife, Margaret. The salesman looked at me like I was wasting his time until I pulled out a check for $2.8 million. Paid in full. No financing, no hesitation. That day, I signed the papers for the Serenity, a 42-foot yacht with leather seating, mahogany finishes, and navigation equipment polished like jewels. My heart raced as I imagined Lindsay's face lighting up. I pictured her hugging me, tears in her eyes, saying, "Dad, you didn't have to do this." But I wanted to. Margaret's life insurance money had been sitting untouched, waiting for something meaningful. And what could be more meaningful than giving my daughter and her husband a place to build memories, a sanctuary away from the chaos of their lives? The plan was simple: invite them aboard under the guise of a weekend rental. Let them enjoy it first, free of pressure, and then reveal the truth that it was theirs. I imagined Derek, for once, putting down his arrogance and offering me respect. I imagined Lindsay seeing me not as an embarrassment, but as her father who still had strength left in him. That hope carried me through every detail. I stocked the galley with their favorite wine, arranged the dining table with bone china, even had family photos tucked into the cabin. But when the day came, nothing went as I imagined. The brass fittings glistened under the May sun as they walked up the gangway. Derek stepped on board, first his loafers clicking against the teak deck. His jaw dropped, but only for a second before that familiar smirk spread across his face. "Well, well," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "How the hell did you afford this floating palace, Ronald? Not Dad, not even Ron. Just Ronald," as if the name itself tasted bitter in his mouth. Lindsay followed, clutching her expensive handbag, her cheeks already flushed with embarrassment. "Dad, please tell me you didn't blow your entire retirement savings on this," she whispered. Instead of joy, there was shame in her voice, as if she was embarrassed to be seen with me. I kept my composure, but inside something shifted. I had planned this as a gift, a bridge back to my daughter. Instead, I was standing on my own yacht, being mocked as if I were a child playing make-believe. And Derek, oh Derek, didn't waste a second to show his contempt. He ran his hand along the leather seating, inspecting every inch, as if he were the one paying for it. I smiled politely, hiding the storm brewing in my chest. If only they knew the truth. Respect was the only thing I wanted, not gratitude. Money I had plenty of. I'd built it, lost some, rebuilt again, and tucked it away quietly while the world assumed I was just another pensioner. What I longed for was the look in my daughter's eyes that once shone when she was a girl, when she'd proudly tell her classmates, "My dad can fix anything." Somewhere along the line, that pride turned to embarrassment. Every word from her carried a tone I knew too well, the kind people use when they feel burdened by your presence. I had hoped the yacht would change that. After Margaret died, I had tried to keep family at the center of my life. Lindsay's birthday just a few months earlier gave me the idea. She had been exhausted, sighing at Derek's constant complaints about finances. She told me almost wistfully, "I wish we could just escape on a boat somewhere." That was my spark. If she missed those days when we'd go fishing together, when life felt simpler, maybe giving her this sanctuary would help heal what had grown between us. But on that day aboard the Serenity, it was clear her priorities had shifted. She wasn't looking at the yacht as a place of peace or family bonding. She was calculating whispering concerns about retirement funds, worried about appearances, about how it looked. "Dad, this just isn't practical," she said, with a nervous glance at Derek, as though his opinion carried more weight than mine ever did. Derek seized on her words like a hawk spotting prey. "Exactly. This isn't practical, Ronald. You're playing yacht club member when you should be worried about managing your assets. We'll need to talk about this before you make more reckless decisions." The nerve of him talking as though my life's work, my fortune, needed his management. I kept my hands clasped behind my back, steady, though every word sliced deeper. They thought they were protecting me from financial ruin, but what they were really doing was stripping me of dignity. And in Derek's tone, it wasn't even about care, it was about control. I recognized that gleam in his eye, the look of a man who believed he had won some unspoken battle. I glanced at the brass compass mounted near the pilot house, the same one I had touched in the showroom. It reminded me of why I had done this. I had envisioned teaching future grandchildren to navigate by the stars, giving them something timeless, something rooted in legacy. Instead, I stood here with my daughter avoiding my gaze and her husband circling my yacht like a vulture. Still, I swallowed my pride and pressed forward. "I thought it would be nice for the family to spend some time together," I said, evenly masking the disappointment swelling in my chest. The words were met with Derek's laughter, sharp, dismissive, cruel. Respect was all I wanted. What I got was mockery, and I felt for the first time that day that maybe this gift was never meant for them at all. The first insult landed before we even sat down. Derek had barely been on board 5 minutes before he stripped the day of any warmth I had imagined. He leaned against the leather seating, letting his manicured fingers glide across it, as though appraising merchandise, not appreciating a gift. His smirk spread as he said, "You really outdid yourself with this rental, Ronald. Guess Social Security pays better than I thought." That word Ronald never dad. Always formal, always cold, like a slap. He spoke it the way someone might spit out a bitter taste. My daughter stood beside him, clutching her purse strap like a lifeline, cheeks, red eyes, darting away from mine. It wasn't shame at Derek's rudeness. No, it was shame at me. Shame that her father dared to step outside the modest picture they'd painted of me. I wanted to believe she would defend me just once, that she'd tell him to stop, remind him who had paid for her education, for their wedding, even for the down payment on their house. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe Dad thought it would be fun just for the weekend." Her voice was laced with that nervous embarrassment I had come to dread. She wanted me small, quiet, unassuming, someone who didn't disturb the fragile image Derek had built of himself. Derek wasn't finished. "You know, this navigation system alone costs more than some people make in a year." He chuckled, running his hand across the polished chrome as if he were the rightful owner. Then he turned to Lindsay, his voice carrying that smug certainty I'd heard too many times. "Your father's clearly making questionable financial decisions. We should probably have a family meeting about managing his assets before he loses everything." His words hung in the salt air like poison. My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. I had seen that look in boardrooms before, the way lesser men puffed themselves up, mistaking arrogance for power. Derek wasn't protecting Lindsay. He was positioning himself to control, to diminish, to claim authority that was never his. I invited them below deck, hoping to shift the atmosphere. "Why don't you explore the cabins? I'll prepare some refreshments," I said, keeping my voice even. Derek's eyes gleamed with contempt as he replied, "Come on, babe. Let's see how much your dad spent on his little adventure." His footsteps echoed as he disappeared below, his mocking laughter floating back up through the hatch. I stood at the railing, my knuckles white against the brass. My daughter's laughter followed him, weak, nervous, but laughter nonetheless. And in that moment, the compass at my side reflected the sun so brightly it stung my eyes. I had wanted it to guide us to unity, but instead it showed me exactly where I stood, with a daughter ashamed of me and a son-in-law who saw me as a fool. The insult wasn't just in his words. It was in the way Lindsay let them pass unanswered. And that silence cut deeper than Derek's contempt ever could. Every detail was planned to heal us, not divide us. When I signed the purchase papers back in March, I imagined this yacht as more than polished chrome and mahogany. It was meant to be a bridge. I had chosen every element with my daughter in mind. The mahogany dining table wasn't just furniture. It was a place where I pictured us sharing meals, laughter, and maybe stories of Margaret, whose absence still pressed against me like a shadow. I had stocked her favorite wines, arranged the guest cabins to feel like a home, even tucked framed photos of family trips into the drawers, so Lindsay would feel connected. This was not a show of wealth, it was a love letter written in fiberglass and teak. Yet as Derek strutted through the cabin below deck, opening drawers and cupboards, with the greedy curiosity of a man inspecting merchandise, I realized I had miscalculated. His every remark dripped with contempt. "Look at this marble countertop. Unbelievable. Your dad's completely lost it." He sneered. Lindsay's laugh followed him, high-pitched and nervous. That sound, once innocent, now stabbed at me. She wasn't laughing because it was funny. She was laughing because she didn't want to defend me. I gripped the railing until my hand ached, staring out at the calm marina waters. The plan had been flawless. Let them believe it was rented, so they could enjoy it without the weight of its value. Later, I'd reveal the truth that it was theirs, a gift to secure their future, a sanctuary from life's struggles. I thought humility would make the reveal sweeter. Instead, my humility had become their weapon. Margaret's face rose in my mind, her voice echoing, "Ronald, don't let them take your kindness for weakness." She was right. I had paid Lindsay's tuition $40,000. I had covered Derek's business shortfall with $60,000 more. The wedding, the house, the endless emergencies, I had answered every call. And still here I was treated as though I was reckless, foolish, an old man desperately trying to play rich. For the first time, I wondered if I had mistaken generosity for love. Perhaps I had been buying hope, trying to purchase back the closeness Margaret and I once had with Lindsay. But love that needed paying for was never love at all. From below, Derek's voice rang out again. "This is just embarrassing. A midlife crisis on water." My daughter's reply was soft but audible. "Maybe Dad just doesn't know what's practical anymore." The words struck harder than any insult Derek had hurled. My daughter, my flesh and blood, believed I was out of touch, a liability. The compass glinted once more in the corner of my eye, and I understood its message. Navigation required knowing exactly where you stood. At that moment, I knew I stood alone on a yacht meant to unite us, while my daughter quietly sided with the man tearing us apart. This wasn't just a failed surprise anymore. It was a revelation. The laughter below deck cut deeper than any storm I'd ever sailed through. It wasn't the sound of joy, but of derision, Derek's sharp chuckles echoing up through the hatch, punctuated by Lindsay's nervous giggles. I leaned against the brass railing, my eyes fixed on the harbor horizon, but my ears betrayed me. Every word floated upward like poisoned smoke. "He must have spent a fortune on this rental," Derek sneered. "It's so unlike him. Completely impractical. Unlike him." My own daughter repeating those words as though I were some stranger, a foolish old man who had suddenly decided to play rich. I clenched my fists until the veins bulged, swallowing the rising tide of anger. This yacht wasn't a rental. It was my wife's memory transformed into something that could have bound us together again. But they couldn't see it. They wouldn't. I remembered the day Margaret's life insurance payout arrived. The grief still raw, the silence in our home unbearable. I had told myself I wouldn't spend it on trivialities. No, I would wait until something meaningful came along, something that honored her memory. This yacht was that moment. I imagined her smile at the thought of our daughter and future grandchildren, laughing on deck, learning to read the compass, watching the stars. The dream had been so vivid, it carried me through months of planning. Now it felt like ashes in my mouth. William and Sarah, Derek's parents, moved carefully through the cabin, their voices warm and sincere. "Ronald, the craftsmanship is extraordinary," William said. "You've chosen something truly special." Sarah chimed in, praising the mahogany dining table, the museum-quality woodwork. Their kindness was like a cool cloth on a burn, but it only highlighted the absence of my daughter's faith in me. She stood beside Derek, her laughter forced her silence complicit. The truth settled on me like an anchor. I had misjudged everything. I thought this gift would heal. Instead, it revealed. It showed me who truly valued respect and who saw me as a burden, an obstacle, an embarrassment. I turned away from the railing and forced a polite smile as they emerged back onto the deck. My chest felt tight, but my voice was steady. "Why don't we sit down for lunch?" I suggested. The words came out calm, but inside a storm was building. Derek clapped his hands mockingly. "Lunch on the yacht. Living the dream, Ronald. Too bad it's just for a weekend." Every insult, every smirk, every glance from Lindsay that told me she agreed, it all crystallized into something sharper, colder than disappointment. I no longer clung to the fantasy that this yacht would bring us together. No, it was going to do something else. The brass compass caught the afternoon sun, its needle pointing unwaveringly north, and in that reflection, I found my resolve. They thought this was a rental, that I was a foolish pensioner chasing illusions. But the truth was far heavier, and when it surfaced, it would sink Derek's arrogance like a stone in deep water. For now, I stayed silent, but I began to plan. The sound of grinding metal was no accident. I knew that instantly. It reached me from below deck while I was arranging lunch plates, a sharp, unnatural screech that didn't belong on a yacht maintained to perfection. Derek had excused himself with false cheer, claiming he wanted to appreciate the craftsmanship. I knew better. That man didn't admire, he searched, inspected, and waited for weaknesses to exploit. When the noise came again, followed by a sudden gush of running water, my pulse quickened. I descended the narrow steps to the galley, and there he was standing over the sink, with an expression so carefully arranged, it almost made me laugh. "Seems the faucet's acting up," he said, tugging dramatically at the handle. Water streamed out in an uncontrollable torrent. Must be one of those quirky old boat problems. I stepped closer, examining the chrome base. Fresh scratches caught the light, jagged grooves that hadn't been there when I brewed coffee earlier that morning. They weren't the gentle wear of time. They were the angry scars left by tools, pliers, maybe twisted with enough force to wreck the internal valve. It was deliberate, and Derek knew it. "Let me take a look," I said, evenly moving him aside. I twisted the handle gently. The grinding came again, metallic and broken, proof that the mechanism had been forced past its natural limit. Derek crossed his arms, feigning sympathy. "Rental equipment, you know. Probably rough treatment from previous guests." I almost laughed at his audacity. He thought this was clever, that he could pass off sabotage as coincidence, that he could watch me stumble through repairs and look foolish in front of everyone. He even had the gall to add, "Good thing it happened now, instead of in the middle of the night. You might be stuck with it for the weekend." His grin was small, smug, satisfied. I felt Margaret's voice in the back of my mind. "Ronald, don't let them mistake your silence for weakness." She was right. This wasn't just about a faucet. This was about respect. This was about Derek believing he could humiliate me with no consequence. I knelt, keeping my voice steady. "It's definitely broken," I said, examining the twisted threads. Lindsay appeared at the top of the stairs, her face creased with worry. "Dad, can you fix it?" she asked. Real concern laced her tone, perhaps the first genuine emotion from her that day. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I've fixed bigger problems than this." Inside, though, I wasn't thinking of the faucet. I was thinking of Derek standing smugly above me, convinced he had won some small victory. He thought I was a man fumbling with tools, desperate to keep a rental in working order. What he didn't know was that I was also a man who built businesses, a man who outmaneuvered competitors far sharper than him, and a man who had installed a state-of-the-art security system on this very yacht. Derek had just written his downfall with his own hands. "I've fixed bigger problems than this, Derek." The words left my mouth calmly, but inside anger pulsed like a drumbeat. I knelt by the sink tool bag, open hands moving with the certainty of decades spent solving real problems, not just mechanical ones, but financial, business, and personal crises. I had been the man people turned to when things broke. Derek thought he was clever, but all he'd done was remind me who I really was. As I unscrewed the faucet assembly, memories washed over me like tidewater. Every turn of the wrench brought back another sacrifice. The $40,000 check I'd written for Lindsay's MBA, proud that she wanted more for her life. The $25,000 I contributed to their wedding, because every father wants his daughter's day to shine. The $60,000 down payment I offered when Derek's temporary business problem threatened to keep them from buying their house. Each gesture had been met with smiles and gratitude that now felt rehearsed, hollow, transactional. I replaced the gaskets with precise care, the same way I had once pieced together failing contracts and faltering companies. My daughter had called me a fixer all her life. Now her husband sneered at me, as if being able to fix things made me less of a man. A plumber, he would say later, as though honest work was beneath him. But I knew better. Fixers are the backbone of families, of businesses, of entire lives. Without fixers, things fall apart. Above me, I could hear Derek talking to the others. His voice carried that false note of concern, the one he used in business meetings, when he wanted to sound sympathetic while quietly sharpening the knife. "Old rentals, you know. Bound to have problems. Poor Ronald's probably struggling down there." His words floated down the stairwell, each one meant to diminish me in their eyes. I tightened the last SIL water, flowing smooth and strong when I tested it. Better than before. I stood wiping my hands on a rag and looked Derek straight in the eye. "Problem solved," I said simply. He blinked clearly, unprepared for how quickly I'd undone his little scheme. Lindsay exhaled, relieved. "You're amazing, Dad. I don't know how you do it." For a moment I saw the daughter I once knew, the one who trusted me implicitly. But her words only highlighted the contrast, the father she remembered, versus the man Derek painted me as. She was caught between two versions of me, and her silence too often sided with him. I placed the tools back carefully, my mind turning. Derek believed he'd won because he had created an inconvenience. But I knew this was just the opening move of a bigger game. He had shown his hand deliberate sabotage, disguised as an accident intended to humiliate me. I'd built my life on recognizing patterns, on seeing angles others missed, and I saw Derek now for exactly what he was: not a rival, not even a man worth fearing, but a small thinker who had just given me all the evidence I needed to dismantle him. The real damage wasn't to the faucet, it was to trust. As I studied the chrome base, the truth was undeniable: this wasn't an accident. The scratches were too deep, too deliberate, etched in a way that spoke of force and intention. I'd spent years working with my hands, from repairing broken engines in my youth to signing contracts worth millions later in life. I knew the difference between wear and sabotage. This was sabotage. I glanced at Derek, who leaned casually against the galley wall, arms crossed, his smug grin daring me to call him out. He wanted me flustered, fumbling with tools, struggling in front of Lindsay so he could cement his narrative of me as a doddering old man wasting his retirement. What he didn't count on was that I'd recognize his handiwork immediately. William descended halfway down the stairs, curious. "Everything all right down there, Ronald?" His voice carried the calm authority of a man used to solving problems, not creating them. Before I could answer, Derek jumped in. "Just one of those old fixtures giving out. Happens all the time on rentals. Ronald's doing his best." His lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly, I almost admired the performance. Almost. William frowned, leaning closer. "That looks like tool marks," he said, pointing at the gouges around the faucet base. Derek was quick, too quick, probably from a previous repair. "You know how it is, someone tries to fix it themselves and makes it worse." That was when I realized Derek had rehearsed this sort of cover before. Lies came to him like second nature. He expected people to believe him because he said it with confidence, because he wore expensive suits and spoke as though the world owed him something. And sadly, too often, Lindsay did believe him. But not this time. Not here. I had seen enough boardrooms filled with smooth talkers who thought they could outmaneuver reality. They always underestimated the quiet man who kept records, who watched closely, who bided his time. That was me. I kept my tone, even my face, neutral. "Yes, could be wear and tear," I agreed. "I'll check the maintenance manual and see what the manufacturer recommends." Derek relaxed, mistaking my calm for surrender. He had no idea that while I spoke, my mind was already cataloging every scratch, every smug look, every careless word he'd uttered. Because what Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the Serenity had a full security system. 8 cameras, high-definition audio included. Every inch of the galley, every corner of the deck, every private moment, when Derek thought he was alone, it was all there, recorded in unforgiving clarity. The faucet could be fixed. That wasn't the problem. What couldn't be fixed was the truth staring me in the face. My daughter's husband didn't just lack respect. He actively sought to humiliate me, to tear me down in front of my own family. The faucet wasn't broken by chance. It was broken by character. And Derek's character had just exposed itself under the bright lights of my yacht. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a strategist again. Derek thought he had embarrassed me by forcing me to play plumber on a rented yacht. What he didn't realize was that this boat carried more than mahogany tables and polished chrome. It carried eyes. The security system I'd had installed the month before wasn't just for theft protection. It was for moments like this, when truth needed proof sharper than words. When the others moved back toward the deck, I slipped quietly into the navigation room, a compact space lined with electronic panels. With a single press, the monitors blinked to life, flooding the room with cold blue light. 8 angles appeared, each capturing a different section of the Serenity. My hands moved with practiced calm, scrolling back through the day's footage until I reached the time Derek had excused himself. There he was, striding into the galley with that same arrogance he wore like cologne. At first he merely poked around, opening cabinets, tugging at drawers like a man surveying what might soon be his. Then he turned to the faucet. I leaned closer as the footage played. He tested it gently, once saw that it worked perfectly, then paused. His head tilted, his eyes flicked toward the door to confirm he was alone. That's when his true face appeared. He gripped the handle with both hands, braced his foot against the cabinet, and wrenched it violently. The audio captured the screech of grinding metal, the grunt of effort, and finally the crack when the mechanism gave way. Derek's lips curled into a smile of satisfaction. He tested it again, watching the water gush uncontrollably. Not once did surprise cross his face. This wasn't discovery, it was victory to him. The camera caught him wiping the base clean with a dish towel, checking for metal shavings, carefully erasing his tracks. The methodical precision told me this wasn't a clumsy accident. This was calculated sabotage meant to humiliate me in front of my family, to prove that I was out of my depth. I copied the footage onto a portable drive, slipping it into my pocket, with the same care I once used to safeguard company contracts, worth millions. Evidence without strategy was useless, I reminded myself. I wouldn't confront him now, not while he could spin excuses, and Lindsay might still believe him. No, I would wait until his arrogance had fully bloomed, until he had talked himself into a corner. Then I would let the cameras speak. Back on deck, his voice floated down through the open hatch. I hope Ronald isn't having too much trouble. These rentals can be tricky. The audacity almost made me smile. He thought he was clever, turning my silence into weakness, using my own kindness as a weapon. But I had learned long ago in business and life that the man who controls the information controls the outcome. Derek had just written his downfall in high definition, and I was patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to play it. He thought I was just a plumber. He forgot I was also a builder. Derek believed that breaking a faucet would break me, that turning me into a handyman scrambling on a rented yacht would lower me in everyone's eyes. But I had built empires from nothing, weathered storms far worse than a smug son-in-law with a pair of pliers. If he wanted a game, he'd picked the wrong opponent. I lingered in the galley after finishing the repair, letting the water run smoothly through the faucet I had restored. Marine fixtures, like men forged in hardship, are made to endure more than casual sabotage. I wiped my hands, slowly giving myself time to think. Derek wanted me rattled. Instead, I felt something sharpen inside me. My patience was no longer the patience of a father trying to win approval. It was the patience of a man preparing a strategy. I stepped back onto the deck, and Derek greeted me with false concern. "Everything okay down there? Those old rentals can be tricky." His grin was smug, his eyes dancing with satisfaction. He wanted the others to see me as a weary old man fighting broken equipment. Lindsay looked at me expectantly, her expression a mixture of worry and embarrassment. William and Sarah, Derek's parents, stayed quiet, though I caught the faint crease of disapproval on William's brow. "It's fixed," I said simply. "No theatrics, no complaint, just fact." Derek's smirk faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly. "Well, good. Lucky you know your way around tools. Must be second nature." The jab was subtle, framing me as little more than a handyman. But what Derek didn't realize was that every careless insult was digging his own grave. I had the footage, the proof, and more importantly, the clarity. This yacht was never about wealth. It was about love, about giving my daughter a piece of her childhood, back a chance to reconnect. Derek had poisoned that with arrogance. Now the yacht wasn't going to unite us. It was going to expose him. I set the portable drive gently on the mahogany table, letting its weight remind me of what I carried, undeniable truth. I didn't need to raise my voice or storm about the deck. No, I had learned long ago that the most devastating victories came in silence delivered at the moment your opponent least expected. Derek leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, basking in what he thought was triumph. I let him. Sometimes the best way to beat a man like Derek is to let him believe he's winning. I poured myself a glass of wine, my hands steady, my face calm, though inside every nerve hummed with anticipation. He thought I was a plumber fixing a rental. Soon he would learn that I was the owner of the Serenity, and when the truth came crashing down, it wouldn't just be a faucet Derek had broken, it would be his entire standing in this family. Derek's false concern was almost comical. He leaned back in his chair as I rejoined them on deck, his arms folded like a man surveying conquered territory. "Glad you got it sorted, Ronald," he said with a smirk. "Old rentals can be a pain, huh?" His voice dripped with mock sympathy, the kind of tone a predator uses when it thinks the prey is trapped. To him, the faucet was a small victory, a reminder that in his eyes I was nothing more than a tired old man fumbling with tools. I didn't rise to his bait. Instead, I set down my wine glass and let the silence stretch. Years in business had taught me a valuable lesson. People like Derek couldn't stand silence. They needed to fill it to assert themselves, to believe they held the upper hand. And right on cue, Derek leaned forward, adding, "You know, it's good. You've got some handyman skills. Comes in handy when you're living on a budget." The words hung in the air. Lindsay shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting to me, then back to Derek. She wanted to smooth things over, but she didn't speak. Sarah and William exchanged a glance, their disapproval of their son obvious now. Yet Derek, oblivious, basked in his own arrogance. I studied him carefully, every smirk, every careless phrase. He had no idea that while he played his little game, his downfall was already captured frame by frame on my security cameras. He thought he was painting me as weak, but what he was really doing was tightening the noose he had placed around his own neck. "Derek," I said finally, my tone even. "Interesting you bring up budgets. You seem to know quite a bit about living within one." His eyes flickered just briefly, but then the smirk returned. "Of course. I built my own consulting business from scratch. I understand value. I understand money." He gestured around the yacht with mock grandeur. "And this is someone trying to play in a league they don't belong in." The arrogance in his words was staggering, but I remained calm. I knew better than to strike too soon. Timing was everything. "It's good you understand money," I replied, my voice low. "Because soon you'll understand something far more important." He raised an eyebrow, curious but not threatened. He thought I was bluffing. The rest of the table fell into an uneasy silence. William cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah busied herself with her napkin. Lindsay forced a laugh that sounded more like a choke. And Derek sat there smug, believing he had established dominance over me. What he didn't realize was that dominance is an illusion, and illusions shatter when truth enters the room. I had no intention of raising my voice or stooping to his level. No, my strategy was patience. And when I revealed what those cameras had caught, the man who thought he was humiliating me would learn the cost of arrogance. Derek's game was almost over. He just didn't know it yet. You can't lie when the truth is on camera. That thought steadied me as I reached into my jacket pocket and set my tablet gently on the mahogany table. Derek was still talking, still spinning the narrative of the poor old man who had rented above his means. His voice oozed confidence as he pointed at the polished woodwork. I mean, Ronald probably paid $3,000 just for this weekend. Insurance must cover mishaps like that faucet. Right, Ronald. He grinned at me, daring me to admit my supposed folly. Instead of answering, I powered on the tablet. The screen lit up, drawing curious glances from around the table. Actually, Derek, I said evenly, I'd like to show you something. His smirk faltered for the briefest second, then returned. What is this, a slideshow of rental agreements? His attempt at humor fell flat, the tension in the air cutting through his words. I tapped the screen and queued up the footage. The timestamp appeared 3:50 p.m. The image of Derek strolling casually into the galley filled the display. Lindsay leaned forward, confused. What are we looking at? Dad, she asked. Just keep watching, I said calmly. The video showed Derek testing the faucet, normally water flowing smoothly, shutting off perfectly. Then came the glance at the door, the shift in his expression, and the violent wrench of both hands twisting the handle. The screech of metal echoed through the speakers, making Sarah flinch. Derek's grunt of satisfaction followed, clear and undeniable. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, pressing a hand to her mouth. William's face hardened, his jaw clenching with every second of the footage. Lindsay gasped audibly, her eyes darting between the screen and her husband's disbelief etched into her features. Interesting, I remarked, my tone calm as still water. The faucet seemed to work just fine until you decided to improve it, Derek. This is ridiculous, Derek barked, but his voice cracked. You've got it all wrong. I was just trying to... The footage kept rolling, showing him bracing his foot for leverage, then wiping away the metal shavings with a dish towel. His lie died in his throat, as his own actions betrayed him in high definition. Fix it. William's voice cut like steel. That's not fixing. That's vandalism. Lindsay's face crumpled. Derek, tell me this isn't real. But it was. Every detail was there, the deliberate force, the smug smile, the cleanup. He couldn't twist this into an accident. The truth was plain, undeniable, and devastating. I paused the video and let the silence expand. Derek sat frozen, his bravado gone, his eyes darting, searching for an escape. I leaned forward slightly. You wanted everyone to believe I was a helpless old man playing with tools. Instead, they see the truth. You weren't mocking me. You were exposing yourself. For the first time all day, Derek had no words. And in that silence, the balance of power shifted. My daughter gasped like she'd seen a stranger. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes locked on the frozen image of Derek standing at the sink pliers, in hand caught mid-sabotage. Derek. Why, she whispered, her voice trembling. For the first time, I saw something crack in her, the blind loyalty she had always wrapped around him like a shield. Now she stared at him as if she didn't recognize the man she had married. Derek scrambled his words, tripping over each other. It's not what it looks like. I was trying to fix it before it broke worse. You know how these things go. His tone was desperate, but the evidence played louder than his excuses. Every scratch, every wipe of the towel, every smug grin was laid bare for all to see. Sarah shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening. I don't know what's gotten into you, Derek. To come aboard as a guest and treat Ronald's property this way. She trailed off, overcome with shame. William's face was carved in stone, his disappointment radiating across the table. I raised you better than this, he said firmly. This is deceit. This is cruelty. Derek's mask was crumbling. The confidence that had fueled him all afternoon drained from his face, replaced with the pale sweat of a man cornered. He looked at Lindsay for rescue, but she pulled back slightly, her gaze cold. All this time you told me Dad was careless, that he didn't understand money. And now this, and her voice broke. You destroyed his property on purpose just to make him look small. The silence after her words was suffocating. The waves outside lapped against the hull, the only sound filling the void. Derek could not. He reached out, grasping her hand, but she pulled it away. For once, Lindsay wasn't protecting him. She was seeing him, truly seeing him. I sat back, letting the scene unfold. This wasn't about me anymore, it was about truth unmasking the pretender Derek had always been. He had strutted on my deck, mocking me, calling me Ronald, treating me like a fool. Now he sat exposed, stripped of his arrogance, his own wife recoiling from him. You wanted to embarrass me, Derek, I said quietly, my voice steady. But all you've done is show everyone who you really are. His jaw worked as if he had more to say, but no words came. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, as though the weight of the evidence pressed him into his chair. Lindsay's eyes brimmed with tears, not for him, but for the realization of what she had married. The footage on the screen was more than proof of sabotage. It was a mirror reflecting back Derek's true character for all to see. And in that reflection, even he couldn't deny what stared back at him. That was the moment my daughter gasped, not because she saw her father differently, but because she finally saw her husband for who he was. He admitted it too late. The weight of silence pressed down until Derek finally snapped. Fine, he barked, slamming his hand against the table. Yes, I broke the damn faucet. But can you blame me? Ronald's been parading around all day like some yacht club millionaire. Someone had to teach him a lesson. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Lindsay flinched, tears streaming down her face. Teach my father a lesson by destroying his property, by humiliating him. Her voice cracked under the strain of disbelief. What kind of man does that? Derek's chest rose and fell with defiance, though the bravado was cracking. A man who sees reality, he spat. Your dad's been playing pretend, wasting money he doesn't have, trying to impress us with things that aren't his. Somebody had to put him back in his place before he dragged the whole family into ruin. Sarah covered her mouth, eyes wide in shock. William leaned forward, his voice like a blade. Ruined. The only ruin I see is the mess you've made of yourself. You sat at this man's table, drank his wine, and repaid him with sabotage and contempt. For the first time, Derek looked rattled. His eyes darted from face to face, searching for an ally, but none came. Even Lindsay, who had once softened every sharp edge of his arrogance, shook her head. All those years I defended you, she whispered. All those times I told Dad you just needed patience, that you were under stress. And this is what you do, you try to destroy him. I sat there calm, my hands folded on the table. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the point when his own arrogance would strip him bare. You didn't sabotage a faucet, Derek, I said quietly. You sabotaged yourself. Every sneer, every insult, every lie, you thought it made me look small, but it only showed how small you really are. He tried one last stand. You think you're so clever, Ronald, with your cameras and your speeches, but you're just an old man clinging to dignity you don't have. Without money, you're nothing. And everyone here knows it. William's fist came down on the table with a crack. Enough, you've disgraced yourself and you've disgraced this family. Sarah's tears fell freely, her head shaking in disbelief at the son she no longer recognized. I leaned forward, meeting Derek's eyes. You wanted to expose me, Derek. But the only thing exposed here is your own contempt. And now that everyone sees it, you can't hide behind lies anymore." His face blanched, his jaw clenched, but the bravado had drained away. The admission had slipped out raw and unguarded, and there was no undoing it. Derek had confessed not just to breaking a faucet, but to the real crime trying to break me. And in that confession, he sealed his fate. That was the moment I stood tall. All afternoon, I had been quiet, absorbing Derek's insults, letting him strut around my yacht as if he owned it. He thought silence meant surrender. What he didn't understand was that silence can also be strategy. When the truth is ready, it doesn't need to shout, it only needs to be spoken once. I rose slowly from my chair, the weight of every eye in the room fixed on me. Derek leaned back, arms crossed, his smirk, fighting to reassert itself after his outburst. He still thought he held some ground. I let the pause linger long enough for him to squirm. Then, in a voice calm as the sea at dawn, I said, "Derek, you've been mocking me all day. Calling me Ronald, treating me like a fool, insisting I rented something I couldn't afford. But there's one thing you never bothered to consider." He frowned, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "And what's that?" I looked around the cabin at the mahogany table, the brass compass, the polished fittings, and then back at him. "This is my yacht." The words landed like thunder in a clear sky. Lindsay gasped, her hand flying to her chest. William and Sarah froze, their eyes widening. Derek blinked, then forced a laugh. "No, come on. You expect us to believe that this is a rental, Ronald. Don't spin stories to make yourself look good." But I didn't flinch. The Serenity was purchased in March. $2.8 million paid in full. Registered under my name with the Coast Guard insured, under my policy, docked here under my account. Every detail of this yacht belongs to me. The color drained from Derek's face. His laugh faltered, died, and left silence in its place. Lindsay looked between us, her eyes wide with shock. "Dad, is that true?" she whispered. "Yes," I said, my gaze never leaving Derek's. "I planned this as a gift. I wanted you both to enjoy it first, free from pressure. I intended to reveal today that this yacht would be yours." Her lips parted, a sound somewhere between a sob and disbelief escaping her. Derek, however, looked like a man struck by lightning. His arrogance collapsed in on itself, replaced by panic. You were going to give us this yacht worth millions." His voice cracked, raw and desperate. I corrected coldly. Past tense. The weight of those words sank into the room like an anchor hitting the ocean floor. Derek's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Lindsay's tears spilled freely, the reality crashing over her. What had been meant as the greatest gift of her life was slipping away because of the man she had chosen to defend. For the first time all day, I felt no anger, only clarity. Respect can't be bought with yachts or money. It can only be earned. And Derek had shown beyond all doubt that he had none. The yacht was never mine alone, it was meant for them. That was the truth I had carried quietly for 2 months, the secret tucked behind every smile as I imagined this day. When I signed the check for $2.8 million, I wasn't thinking of myself. I was thinking of Lindsay, of her tired voice telling me she wished life could feel simpler again, like when we used to go fishing together. I was thinking of Margaret, whose absence left me determined to give our daughter a place of peace. I wasn't buying a toy. I was building a sanctuary. So when I said this yacht was going to be a gift, the words hung in the cabin like a church bell tolling the hour of judgment. Derek's face twisted in disbelief. "A gift for us," he stammered, his bravado cracking like thin ice. His eyes darted to Lindsay, desperate for her to speak, to save him. But Lindsay's tears spoke louder than words. She stared at me, her lips trembling as though she couldn't process what she was hearing. "Dad," she whispered, "you were going to give us this, all of this." I nodded, my voice steady. "Yes, that was my plan. To surprise you, let you think it was a rental so you could enjoy it without worry. Then I'd tell you it was yours to keep, a legacy from your mother and me. Something to bind us together again." For a fleeting moment I saw the little girl she once was, the one who used to sit beside me on a small fishing boat, her hair whipping in the wind, her laughter rising above the waves. But that vision dissolved as quickly as it came, replaced by the woman who now sat beside a man that had just sabotaged her father's gift. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of wine. "Ronald," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "that's one of the most generous things I've ever heard. And for Derek to treat it." She stopped, shaking her head, too overwhelmed to finish. William leaned forward, his tone heavy with gravity. "Do you understand what you've thrown away, son? This wasn't just a boat. It was trust. It was respect. And you shattered it with your arrogance." Derek's mouth opened, but no words came. For once, the man who always had a smug comment, a quick dismissal, sat speechless. His face was pale, his composure gone. He had strutted onto my yacht, certain of his superiority, and now he sat revealed as a man who had destroyed his own inheritance with his own hands. I looked at him, not with anger, but with finality. "Yes, Derek. This yacht was never meant for me. It was meant for you and Lindsay. But that was before you showed me who you truly are." The room fell silent, every word etched into memory. What was once a dream of unity had become a reckoning. One word changed, everything was. I saw Derek flinch when I said it, as though he'd just realized the future he thought was secured had slipped like water through his hands. He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "Ronald, Mr. Parker, come on, let's not overreact. It was a mistake. I admit that. But we can move past it." I shook my head slowly. "No, Derek. A mistake is spilling wine on the carpet. This was deliberate. You didn't just break a faucet, you tried to break me. And in the process, you broke the trust this gift was built upon." Lindsay's eyes brimmed with tears. "Dad, please. Don't say the gift is gone. We didn't know." Her voice cracked and I felt a sharp pang of grief in my chest. I had hoped she would stand with me, defend me, but instead her plea sounded more like someone mourning the loss of wealth than the loss of respect. William's face was grim, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Your father has every right, Lindsay. A gift is only a gift if it's received with gratitude. What Derek did today makes him unworthy of it." Sarah dabbed her eyes with a napkin, her soft voice trembling. "Ronald, I'm so sorry for what you've endured. No parent should have to face such contempt after such generosity." Derek's mask cracked further, his tone slipping into frantic bargaining. "Look, I'll pay for the faucet. I'll cover any repair bills, any maintenance you want. I'll prove I can take care of it. Just don't throw this away over one stupid argument." I let him finish, then met his gaze with a cold steadiness. "You still don't understand. This was never about the faucet. It was about character, respect, integrity, things you can't buy back with a check." The color drained from his face. His bravado was gone, now replaced by something far more telling: fear. Fear of losing what he thought was his. Fear of standing exposed as the small man he truly was. I turned to Lindsay, my voice softer but firm. "Sweetheart, I wanted this yacht to be a place where we could heal, where you could remember your mother and the times we shared. But today you showed me where your loyalty lies, and it wasn't with me." Her tears fell freely, and for once she had no defense. She stared at the table silent as though the weight of her choices pressed too heavily on her shoulders. I stood then, my chair scraping softly against the deck. The gift is withdrawn. Permanently, this yacht remains mine. What was meant to unite us has instead revealed the truth. And once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. The silence that followed was absolute. Derek slumped in his chair, pale and hollow-eyed. Lindsay sat frozen, her world unraveling. And I, for the first time that day, felt clarity settle over me like a steady wind filling a sail. Character can't be bought with millions. That truth rang louder in my mind than the clinking of silverware or the sound of waves lapping against the hull. Derek thought money was the only scorecard that mattered. He saw my modest house, my old sedan, my simple clothes, and assumed I was poor, unworthy of respect. He never understood that humility was a choice, not a necessity. Now he sat across from me, stripped of his smugness, his hands trembling slightly, as he tried to claw back ground he had already lost. "Ronald, I know I messed up," he stammered. "But everyone deserves a second chance. I'll make it up to you, I swear." I looked at him steadily. "Derek, you've had more chances than most men ever get. Every check I wrote, every sacrifice I made for you and Lindsay, that was a chance. And instead of respect, you gave me contempt." His eyes flickered with desperation. "That's not true. I was under pressure. Work has been brutal, the bills keep stacking up. I let the stress get to me." "Stress doesn't excuse character," I replied evenly. "A man shows who he really is when he thinks no one's watching. And you showed us today in high definition." I tapped the tablet still resting on the table. The frozen image of him wrenching the faucet stared back undeniable. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "Ronald is right, Derek. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was calculated. You mocked him, you sabotaged his property, and you laughed about it. That isn't stress, that's cruelty." William leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You've spent years thinking respect can be demanded with arrogance. Today you learned it has to be earned. And right now you've earned nothing but shame." Lindsay finally spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I don't even recognize you, Derek. You've made me doubt everything." Her words hit him harder than anything I could have said. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Lindsay, please," he begged. "Don't let your father turn you against me. He's manipulating this. He wants to make me look like the villain." But she shook her head, her sobs breaking through the quiet. "I don't need Dad to make you look like anything. You did that all on your own." I stood, letting the truth settle heavy in the air. "Derek, you think this yacht was about money? It never was. It was about family, about love, about building something lasting. And you proved that you care for none of those things. You only care for what you can control." His shoulders slumped, his fight gone. He looked like a man realizing too late that the fortune he thought he had within his grasp had vanished. Not because I took it from him, but because his own character had destroyed it. Respect once lost cannot be bought back. Not with millions. Not with apologies. And certainly not with Derek's hollow promises. Even Lindsay couldn't defend him now. For years, she had been his shield, softening his sharp edges, excusing his arrogance as stress, asking me to be patient with him. But in that moment, with Derek pale and sweating under the weight of his own words, she sat frozen, her hands clenched together, unable to look at me. Her silence spoke volumes. "Sweetheart," I said gently, turning toward her, "this yacht wasn't just a gift. It was a piece of your mother's memory. I wanted you to have a place where you could breathe, where family could feel like family again. But today, you chose to stand beside a man who mocked me, who sabotaged me, who treated me as if I were beneath him. Her lips trembled. Dad, I didn't know. I thought you rented it. I thought Derek was just being protective, I interrupted softly. Protective men don't humiliate fathers. They don't tear down the people who gave them everything. Protective men build. They honor. They respect. What Derek did wasn't protection. It was destruction. Her tears fell freely, streaking her cheeks. She shook her head slowly, as though she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Deep down, she knew the truth. She had aligned herself with Derek for too long, dismissing my concerns, brushing aside the subtle disrespect he showed at every gathering. And now the mask had fallen, and she was staring at the raw reality of who her husband truly was. William broke the silence, his tone heavy with fatherly disappointment. Lindsay, your husband hasn't just disrespected Ronald. He's disrespected you. Every sneer, every lie, it wasn't just aimed at your father. It was a reflection of how little he values family at all. Sarah nodded, dabbing her eyes. Honey, sometimes love blinds us, but today you have to see clearly. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his bravado gone. Lindsay, don't listen to them. This is still about us. We can move past this. His voice was urgent, pleading, but hollow. Lindsay turned toward him finally, her expression breaking into something between grief and clarity. Past this how? By pretending I didn't just watch you destroy something that wasn't yours, by ignoring the way you mocked my father, the man who's given us more than we ever deserved. Derek opened his mouth, but no sound came. For the first time, he had nothing left to spin. I placed a hand gently on the polished table. Lindsay, I won't tell you who to love or how to live your life. That's your choice. But choices have consequences. Today you showed me yours. You chose to sit silent while he tried to humiliate me. And silence, my dear, is also a choice. Her sobbing grew quiet, almost a whisper against the lapping waves outside. And though I ached for her, I knew the truth: she could no longer defend him. Not after today. Not after what we had all seen with our own eyes. Justice was quiet, like the sea at dusk. There was no shouting, no grand explosion of rage, only the heavy silence that follows truth revealed. Derek stood from the table abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Come on, Lindsay. We don't have to sit here and take this. His voice wavered, but he tried to make it sound commanding. Lindsay rose slowly, her movements hesitant, as if the weight of every choice pressed on her shoulders. She looked at me, her eyes red and wet, silently pleading for something I couldn't give her anymore. Dad, she began, but her voice failed. You've made your choice today, I said softly but firmly. And I've made mine. This yacht was meant to be your future, your sanctuary. But respect comes before inheritance, Lindsay. Without respect, gifts turn to ashes. She lowered her gaze, her tears dripping onto the polished deck. Derek grabbed her arm and tugged. Let's go, he snapped, more desperate than commanding now. They walked toward the gangway, Derek muttering under his breath, gesturing angrily, as though the loss were somehow my fault. Lindsay followed silent, her head bowed. William stepped beside me, his voice thick with shame. Ronald, I can't express how sorry I am. My son's behavior was inexcusable. If you'd prefer we leave as well, absolutely not, I interrupted, my voice steady. You and Sarah have shown nothing but respect. You're welcome here. Please stay. Let's enjoy what remains of this afternoon, as it was meant to be enjoyed. Through the wide window of the cabin, I watched Derek and Lindsay's figures grow smaller on the dock, diminished by the backdrop of the harbor. Derek's gestures were wild, frantic, but Lindsay walked in silence, shoulders slumped, as if every step pulled her deeper into regret. Sarah joined William and me at the table. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "Do you think they'll be all right?" I sighed, gazing at the compass fixed near the helm, its brass surface catching the fading light. Derek will land on his feet. Men like him always do. As for Lindsay, she has to decide whether she wants to build a life with a man who destroys bridges out of spite. That's a choice only she can make. William poured 3 glasses of wine, raising his in a quiet toast. "To character," he said solemnly. To character, Sarah and I echoed our voices, carrying a weight deeper than the words themselves. The sun dipped lower, painting the water gold, the gentle rocking of the Serenity lulling us into peace. For the first time in months, I felt the storm inside me calm. Derek hadn't just lost a yacht. He had lost the inheritance of trust and respect that no money could ever buy. Justice didn't roar that day. It whispered, and it was enough. Life has a way of revealing people's true character, often when they believe no one is watching. My son-in-law thought he was clever, mocking me as a poor old man, calling me a plumber, even sabotaging my yacht to humiliate me. What he didn't know was that every act of disrespect was being recorded, and that the rental he scorned was mine all along. I had intended to gift it to him and my daughter, but character matters more than wealth. In the end, he lost not because I punished him, but because his own arrogance destroyed what could have been his. This experience taught me that generosity without respect is wasted, and silence is not weakness. It is strength waiting for the right moment. Sometimes the most powerful justice isn't loud revenge, but simply allowing people to face the natural consequences of their actions. And now I want to turn to you. Have you ever faced betrayal from family or loved ones, where respect was missing no matter how much you gave? How did you handle it, and what did you learn? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear from you. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe, and share it. Respect is priceless, and dignity cannot be bought. Thank you for listening.